Skylar suggested maybe a little bit on circuits. Does anybody else have any requests for the DJ? 21 and 22 on homework. Okay, let me pull up the homework. Annie asked about, yeah, you sent me an email as well. I'm gonna pull it up real quick. Well, eventually. Okay. 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 Twitch here. Is anybody on Twitch? Skylar and Gabrielle, so no new people on Twitch, I don't think. All right. Okay, let me see if I can get Ian over here. So remember, I don't like to do the homework with you because you were graded on the work for the homework. Thank you. But I am willing to talk about some general things. Okay. Let's have, I was going to pull up the homework. Where is it? Sorry, I got distracted. So I'm sure y'all are just ready for the semester to be over. Same here. Okay. Let me close this, and then I can do share my screen. Okay. So here's our beautiful homework. Isn't it lovely? So Andre says 20. Do you not just do 523 equals 343 over 2L? No. You mean 21? Okay. I was like, what? Okay. A violin's A string is 30 centimeters long for the bridge to top nut. Sounds musical note A when playing without fingering. How far from the top nut should the violinist place their finger in order to play the note C? So you used 343. 343 is the speed of what? Speed of sound, okay. Specifically, sorry, it's like popping up this thing right over the chat. That's really not helpful, teams. Yeah, it's the speed of sound in air. You need the speed of sound on the string. Yep. So that's why you need to know the 440 is because that helps you get the speed of sound or speed of a wave on the string. Can I turn these off? This is really annoying. It's like, y'all can't see this, but every time you comment, it pops up a notification that you've commented, but the notification covers your comment. It's incredibly irritating. Okay. Awesome. I'm in the meeting. Why is it still notifying me? Okay. If it keeps, I've moved it now, so you can't quite see it as much. Yeah. I'm in this meeting. I didn't click away. It's still doing it. So irritating. Okie doke. What else? Aha. Yeah, it does it even if I'm in it. It's really annoying. For 22, I don't know where to start or really how to determine part A. Ian has found something. Hopefully the review session. Hello. 22. Oh, okay, a narrow column of air. So it's a column of air in a pipe. It doesn't really talk about it. Like, you have to kind of infer. It talks about the behavior of the tube. There's a column of air. It's essentially a standing wave in a tube. And it wants you to figure out whether it's open at both ends, open at one end, or closed on both ends. And it gives you some information about the frequencies, and nothing outside of that range. So for this one, oops. Okay. So this one involves something we talked about really briefly. Quickly before I forget. Oh no, wait, it's recording on Twitch. Okay, never mind. I wanted to make sure I was recording us. I also figured out how to put stuff on YouTube. Yay, very exciting. Review session. Okay, so we talked about this really kind of in passing, about the difference between open tubes, open closed tubes, and closed tubes. So what this has to do with is, if you think about, you have a tube, same tube, same length, right? And this one is open at both ends, this one is closed at both ends, this one is open at one end and closed at the other. You will get standing waves in each of these. And for the open and the closed, it looks pretty normal, right? So you have a node at this end and a node at this end and an antinode in the center. And it follows that same pattern where your lambda is, 2L over M, right? For open, you have, instead of having a node at both ends, you have an antinode at both ends and a node in the middle. So it looks like, and it's still lambda equals 2L over M, In this case, m is the number of antinodes. In this case, m is the number of nodes. But for the same length, you're going to get the same frequencies, right? So you would say, okay, the fundamental frequency is V over mv over 2L. Your fundamental frequency is mv over 2L. And you'll get so let's say the fundamental is 100 hertz for this one and 100 hertz for this one. Then your second harmonic would be 200, your third harmonic would be 300, and the same down here, 200, 300. Right. All that hopefully is making sense. If we look at the open closed tube, this is the one that's a little bit different. You have a node at the closed end and an antinode at the open end. So instead of lambda equals 2L over m, you end up with 4L over m, but only odd numbers. Where m could be either the number of nodes or antinodes, it ends up being the same. Right? Like this one has one node and one antinode, right? So for this one, how would this one be different? Well, if 2L over m, right? So if this is our fundamental for this, then our fundamental for this one is going to be, right? So it would be 1/2 of the regular fundamental, right? I will get a standing wave. My fundamental frequency is going to be much lower than it would be for the same tube that's either open, open, or closed, closed, right? So my fundamental for this one is going to be 50 hertz. Okay, so then what's the next one? Okay, well, F2 would be 100, but it's only odd numbers. So there is none. The next time you get a resonance is at F3. There's no F4. The next one you get is F5 is 250 hertz. So the idea for question 22 is that you're trying to figure out, you're given sort of 3 frequencies, and you're trying to figure out, does it match this pattern or does it match this pattern? So if I give you, which pattern? So you have 100, 200, 300, etc. And you have 50, 150, 250, etc. Right? These are different patterns. So if I give you a new set of frequencies, okay, and I ask you which pattern does it match? All right, give me a second to come up with it. Okay, So I give you, wait, make sure they're doing all right. Yep. I give you these three frequencies. You don't know anything, don't know above or below. So it's not guaranteed that this is the fundamental. But I do know there's nothing in between. So this is the same as that question. Tell me which pattern it seems to match. Okay, Ian says the first pattern. Anybody else have thoughts? Andre says second. What's the difference between those two patterns? Even and odd. Even and odd what? I can see that. That actually kind of makes sense. But that's not actually the distinguishing thing between these two. Aha. So Andre says if you divide by the difference, the remainder is 200. So what are you doing? Divide what by what difference? Aha, I see. So yes, you are correct. So if we look at this pattern, each of these is separated by 100 hertz. The next one would be 400, it'd be 100 hertz. And this number is the same as the fundamental. Over here, these are all separated by 100 hertz, but our fundamental is 50. 100 is not one of those frequencies. So if our difference is not the fundamental, for this one, the difference is the fundamental, right? It's just simple multiples. So we look over here, the difference between these is 400. Difference between these is 400. Okay. If that were the fundamental, right, then it would be 400, 800, 1200. Excuse me. Ugh. These clearly don't match. Doesn't make sense. Okay, so what's our alternative? Is if our difference is twice the fundamental. So that would be 200 equals F1. So that would be 200 is F1, 400 is F2, but we don't have even numbers. 600 is F3, 800 is F4, which we don't have. 1,000, 1,200, which we don't have. 1,400, 1,600, which we don't have. 1,800. So we have got m equals 5, m equals 7, and m equals 9 for a open-closed tube. Because it does not match the pattern, this would be if it was an open-open or closed-closed. All right, Andre, does that help you figure out what you're doing? Everybody's walking their dogs, so I'm going to provide dog updates. A beautiful long-haired German Shepherd just went by. He's a very nice dog, but he's very shy, so I've never pet him. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Is that a cat dressed as a dog? That tongue is really freaking me out here. Also, why does it have like a ID badge? That's weird. I'm not sure if that's cute or not. That's a little bit terrifying. Yes, it is impossible to determine if it's open on both ends or closed on both ends. That is correct. So I think the answer says it could be either. Usually they're open on both ends, because if it's closed on both ends, you usually can't hear anything at all. So it's not a very effective tube. All right. What's next? I'm gonna go turn my air conditioning on. I'll be right back. Tell me what I should do next. I want you to know I did spend like half an hour fixing this chair so it wasn't as squeaky, and it lasted about 20 minutes, and now it's squeaky again. Ooh, I realized I should record this because there's people in other classes might want to watch it. Teams. There we go. Yes, Ian, you're correct. I know Annie sent me an email about, I want to say 15 and 16. Is that right? And Ian asked about, I think, 16. So for these kinds of questions, yeah, how to tell if it's constructive or destructive. Okay. So for these, when you have two sources, it's weird. Two sources. Remember, we're always interested in delta phi. Whenever you see a problem like this, it is all about the delta phi. So if you have two sources, then whether you hear constructive or destructive at any random point will depend on the path length difference between them. Delta R is the path length difference. Whoops. Path length difference. Delta phi naught is the initial phase difference. This is whether they are, the sources are in or out of phase. I'm gonna say in sync, right? In sync is they're either together or they're the opposite of together. Or out of sync, right? In sync, perfectly out of sync. Not in sync, but not perfectly out of sync. Okay. And then delta phi is our result. Do we get constructive interference or destructive interference? Max constructive, perfect destructive. So this is sort of, are they in sync or out of sync by the time they get to some particular position, right? So this happens when our delta phi is 0, 2 pi, 4 pi, etc. It's off by an entire cycle. Perfect destructive happens when it's off by half a cycle, odd pi. Okay. All of this making sense, hopefully. Sorry, I'm having bug problems. Okay. Phew. So the amplitude for constructive is 2a, the amplitude for destructive is 0. Okay, so these are kind of our three things. If you know two of them, you can find the third. So if you know the path length difference and delta phi naught, you can find out whether it is constructive or destructive at that particular point. Some of these also ask, if you know the result and you know the path length difference, you can figure out whether they are in phase or out of phase. The classic problem for this is if we tell you what's happening exactly in the middle, or say right here, you're some distance in front, but exactly in the middle. That means our delta R is what? Zero. So our delta phi is nothing except our delta phi naught. So if our two sources are in sync, then by the time the waves get to that location, they're still in sync, right? So if they are delta phi naught, if the sources are in phase, then I will get constructive interference at middle symmetric kind of positions. Delta R equals 0, symmetric, right? But if I tell you, okay, here's the source, and I stand directly between them, so this is source 1, this is source 2, and I hear nothing, what does that mean? Yes, you are correct. When they are winding in phase, that means that their sources are in sync. That might be a good way to think about it. Teaching for, what, 5 years, and it never occurred to me to say in sync before. In sync, right?